Hi and welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to use CXProgrammer and CX Designer to create a demo ticket machine for a cinema. So let's get started. This particular cinema charges €10 for a single person to watch one movie, or €35 for a family. There's also the option to have a weekly ticket at €40 for a single person or €100 for a family. This is obviously very limited. In reality, you probably have a weekly, monthly, yearly option, and those prices are probably a bit out of date, but we're just doing a demo here. We're also going to use SFC, Sequential Function Charts, and Structured Text, ST, and Ladder to complete this. So we'll get started now with programming and we'll see how we get on. So the first thing we're going to do is open up CXProgrammer. And we're going to create a new program. So we'll go File, New. In this case, we're going to select a CJ2M, and we're going to use Ethernet IP, and our IP address for this is going to be 192.168.1.1. That's the device we're connected to. And I'm going to go OK. By default, CXProgrammer opens up a ladder type project, but we're going to use SFC. Now SFC is only supported on certain PLCs in the Omron range, as the one that I've selected does support it. So I'll click on Program, Insert Program, and I have three options for this particular PLC: a ladder, structured text, and SFC. So we're going to select SFC. So it's asking me to name my new project, and I'll just call it Movie SFC. And we're just going to leave the task type here as unassigned. So we now have two programs here: the ladder logic program, which is the first to run, and now my new unassigned SFC. We don't need this ladder project, so we can go ahead and delete it. But before we do that, we need to unassign it. I'm going to right click, go to Properties, and where it says Task Type, I'm going to unassign it. I'm then going to select my SFC project, right click, go to Properties, and I'm going to assign that to the cycle task 0 or startup. Done. I can go ahead and delete my ladder program because it's no longer needed. So now the only program I have as part of this project is my SFC. So Omron has a native SFC interface, which you can see here, and by default it puts in 2 steps with 1 transition. I'll have a complete separate video on SFC and using SFC within the Omron CXProgrammer interface, but also a general introduction to SFC and how you can use SFC to make your ladder program a lot more readable, easier to maintain and update. But let's go ahead and start programming or setting up our SFC here. So step 1 within SFC is always our startup set or initialization step. So I'll just call that setup for now. These are just labels, they have no meaning, but they should be descriptive. So anyone who comes along and looks at your SFC later on can immediately tell what the purpose of this step is going to be. So this step will be wait for input. I could probably be more descriptive and say waiting for user to select ticket type, but just to make it fit better on the screen. So now I've done that and I need to add another step. So if I right click on the last step, I have different options here, and the one I'm going to select is to add a transition and a step. So I'll go ahead and do that, and now I have another step. So what is the transition between the user selecting the welcome screen, in this case, or the waiting for input? They're going to select something on the welcome screen, and then they're going to go to the next step. So what's the next step? In our case, we're going to say select ticket type. So the user has now selected the ticket type within this step. Right click, add transition and step, So once they've selected the ticket type, we probably want to know how many of the tickets they want. So our next step will be select number of tickets. That's our next step. Once they've selected the number of tickets, we'll add one more step. We're going to have a transition between the number of tickets, and what's the last thing they want to do? Well, they're probably going to need to pay for the tickets. So let's say pay. They're going to want to pay for the tickets. Once they've paid for the tickets, we have to add one more step. We're probably going to want to print the tickets. So we finished the cycle. We've printed the tickets, the user has taken them and gone off to watch the movie. In this case, the SFC will stop here and won't go any further. So we could only really print one ticket and then our machine is completely useless. So what we need to do is link this last step, print tickets, back to the beginning to wait for the next person to come along. But I told you before that each step must have a transition, and there's no transition here. So I need to add one first. So I'll right click and go to add transition. So there's my last transition. From this transition, I'll right click, go to connections. I can select add jump from transition. So I'll select that one, and I want to go all the way back to wait for input. Okay, so that's done. So at the end, when the user has printed the tickets, it will go back to the start. It's important to note that this is a very simplified example. I haven't included options like allowing the user to cancel the transaction halfway through the process, or resetting the transaction if the user walks away from the terminal, or refunding the money if the tickets fail to print. There's many different operations I haven't really included here. This is just an example how we can use SFC within the CXProgrammer in order to complete a task. I can select and I can just go tidy all SFC elements. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So now I've done that, I need to go and set up the various components in order to make this actually do something. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide what each step is going to do. Well, my startup step probably in this case does nothing for this example, but in reality I might want to check that the system door is open. I might want to check is there paper before letting the machine start. I might want to check am I connected to various components like a database before I let the computer start. But for our example, our setup was going to do nothing. Our waiting for input, does that screen have any action assigned to it? It's just sitting there and it's waiting for the user to do something. The next step, select ticket type, does have an action assigned to it, selecting the ticket type. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go add action, and I have different options here. I can add it as a structured text or a ladder logic. So I'm going to add a structured text to this. So the next one, select number of tickets. Again, I'll add a new action and I'll make that a structured text. When it comes to paying for the tickets, I'm going to add a new action, but this time I'll add a ladder, just to show you the difference between the two. And again, for printing the tickets, I'll add a ladder. So we've got a mix now. We've got some structured text and some ladders. As you can see here, the actions are given 1, 2, 3, 4 by default. To define them, you go to the left hand side of the screen and select actions and expand that out. And you can see there I have action 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 5. And it has a little ST to say it's a structured text and a little download arrow to say it's a ladder. So we'll rename these later when we decide what action we need to do. The next thing we need to handle is the transitions between the various steps. By default, CXProgrammer adds the word false, which means the transition will just stop and will never proceed past this point. If we type true, the transition is now true, which means nothing will stop it from passing from setup into waiting. As we've no action assigned to setup, we're just going to leave this transition true for the time being because it doesn't do anything. The next transition we need to configure is the one between the two steps waiting for input type and select ticket type. To do that, we select from the left hand side of the screen, transitions, insert transition, and I'm going to insert a ladder transition. I'm asked for a name, so I'm going to call this trans, just to differentiate it from the actions, underscore system selection started. So that's my transition set up. So I'm going to select that, Control C, and where it says false here, I'm going to Control V or copy that in. You would think that Omron would provide a way of automatically selecting these through a drop-down list. You either have to manually type it or cut and paste it. So with that done, let's continue on and select the next transition. So this transition is between selecting the ticket type and the number of tickets. So again, a new transition. We'll call this one trans. Ticket type selected. Copy that, and I'll paste that into this transition. So I'll do the other two. So the transition between select number of tickets and the pay for tickets. So I've gone ahead and I've completed the last few transitions and I've tidied it up a little bit. So let's go ahead and get some of our constants installed. The first one we're going to set up, I'm going to add symbol. It's going to be for a single ticket, single movie price. That's going to be an integer and we're going to put that into D5. The next one I'm going to set up, and I'm going to put that into D6. My next one I need to set up is going to be single weekly price. That'll be an integer. I'm going to put that into, and I'm going to put that into D7. One last one. It's going to be family weekly price. That's going to be an integer, and I'm going to put that into D8. So there's the 4 prices I need to have. So we're going to go ahead and add them to an action in order to set them. So we'll go back in to my SFC and we'll decide the best place to put them. The best place to set up a constant like that would be in the setup. So let's add a action to the setup. Structure text. That's action number 6. So let's rename action number 6. Rename. And I'm going to call that ACT_setup. And that's now updated. So if I click on that, you can see that on this side here, I'm allowed to enter my structure text. I find it a lot easier to just double click and go straight into it here. So let's configure our variables. The first one was single movie price. So let's select single movie price. In structure text, to set a value to a variable, you need to use the colon equals. So colon equals, and I think it was €10. And we have to put a semicolon at the end. The next one we had was single weekly, 35. Then we had family. That was €40. And then we had family that was 100. So we've now used structured text to set our 4 values for our single movie, our single weekly price, our family movie price, and our family weekly price. The next step we need to configure is to select ticket type. We can actually do this using the HMI and multifunction buttons, so we'll look at that in a second. The next step down, select the number of tickets. That can also be done within the multifunction buttons within the HMI. The paying for ticket we'll look at later, and the printing ticket we'll look at later. So let's get to the HMI and let's start configuring. I'm going to open up CX Designer, and as always we're going to select the NS5TQ1 and we'll call this project movie. And my first screen is going to be my welcome screen. And its screen number is 0. I'm just going to change the background to white. I'll just zoom in a little. Okay, so let's add a button. Later on we're going to make this look a bit more professional. We'll probably have a logo in the background. With the button set up, we'll add another screen, new screen, and this time the user is going to select how many tickets they want. So we'll call that number of tickets. I'm going to change the background to white again, and I'm going to add 2 buttons. And in the center, I'll add a numeric display that will allow the user to select how many tickets they want. The top button will be to increase the number, so more. And the bottom ticket could be to decrease the number or less. And like before, we'll add the next button when they've selected how many tickets they want. Let's add the next screen. So there's 4 different pass types. So I'll add 4 buttons. First button will be single, movie pass. The next one will be single week pass. The third one will be a family movie pass. And the fourth one will be the family weekly pass. So there's my 4 passes configured. At this point you might want to inform the user how much each of these different passes is going to cost them. So we might add in a numeric control to tell them the cost of each one. So we know the number from the previous screen, we know how many tickets they're looking for, and we know the price of a single pass as we've set that up in our PLC. We need to multiply the 2 so we can show the user the total cost. Once they've selected the right ticket type, they're going to click next. Let's add the next screen, which is going to be to pay. So we've no physical way for the user to pay on this particular system because we're just simulating it. So what we'll just add is a numeric value that shows how much is owed, and we'll add a single button here which will deduct €5 from the total load until the total reaches 0, or until it's gone to -0, at which point you'll owe change. And once the amount of money has been paid into the machine, it should automatically print the tickets. So let's add the next screen and the final screen, which will be print tickets. Let's change the background to white. And we're just going to add a label that will say tickets printing. Within our system, we don't actually have a printer, so we're just going to use a timer to simulate the tickets being printed. Once the tickets are printed, we'll go right the way back to the welcome screen, waiting for the next user. So now we've configured half this project. We've got the HMI, or the bones of the HMI together. We've got the SFC together, and we have some of the code done within the PLC itself. Within the next video, we're going to populate the structured text elements within our actions, and we're going to rename these actions for the SFC. We'll then continue on and we'll set up our HMI, and we'll actually map these buttons that we've created here to our PLC. Thanks for watching this video.